All right. Hello, everyone. Rennie, up. You're here off of mute. We got everyone on stage. So, welcome to January's Tariff Tea. The kettle is hot. Tariffs and trade are moving. And guess what, Rennie? Venezuela is knocking on the lid, but that flavor probably needs a little more steep time before it makes the cup. And since Venezuela doesn't really produce tea, that pot may have a little bit of an oil tint to it. So,
For sure.
all right, some quick housekeeping with the disclaimer on the screen. Everything we're covering today is for informational purposes only. It isn't legal advice, and as we know, regulations can shift very quickly. In fact, on New Year's Eve, we had to make some changes, which we will be reviewing shortly. And as always, review specific facts with your internal or external advisors. And with that, let's jump in. So, welcome. I am Nunzio Di Filippis. This is Rennie Olson. We are the licensed customs broker running this Tariff Tea. And together today, we're here to break down what's hot in the world of tariffs and trade, share a little bit around the CargoTrans insider brew, and walk through today's strategy spotlight, which is on the BKIP, broker known importer program. We will leave some time for Q&A. Hopefully, we'll have time for Q&A. Feel free through any time throughout this webinar to go ahead and log in your Q&A or just the questions, and we'll try to provide the answers. To get started, we'll walk right into the hot headlines. And you could say we were on fourth down, a few yards to go. We were on the 50-yard line, and the administration decided to punt on New Year's Eve, right? And what did they punt? Well, wooden kitchen cabinets and bathroom vanities, they remain at 25% instead of 50%. So anyone that's doing or thinking about doing some remodeling, good news for you. Also, the upholstered furniture remains at 25% instead of going up to 30, and this has been punted all the way until end of year, so all the way until January 1, 2027. Also, mangia la pasta, so more good news to kick off the new year. The previously announced anti-dumping or additional anti-dumping duties on pasta has also been punted. And lastly, there was additional Section 301 tariff increases on Chinese chips that have also been punted until June 2027. So probably a bit of a strategic move there by the administration since we are still under negotiations with China. So Rennie, with that opening to to 2026, does that finally mean that I can retire this Terrified T-shirt, or will we see more backpedaling? What's your thoughts on the way this year has opened so far?
I just think it represents that we remain in a very fluid situation, that we have to stay, abreast of changes because even though this was punted and deferred, for the year, keep in mind that any international events, any country-specific challenges between negotiations that happen in the interim could easily be, reversed. So it just means that constant awareness is required on the topic of tariffs. So don't retire that shirt just yet.
All right. Also, India, they are going through some of their own reforms where they're kind of cutting down on a lot of the red tape for imports. So this will open up their market, to the US. It'll be easier for exporters from the US to sell to India. So obviously that is good news as those talks continue where India really is motivated to lower that 50% IPA tariff that they're currently facing. And still, we are still waiting for the Supreme Court to let us know what's going to happen with the IPA tariffs. So there's a 90 billion approximately that was collected in IPA tariffs last year that are waiting to, for everyone is waiting to understand, are those coming back? Rennie, at this stage, what should importers be doing while they wait for the Supreme Court?
Yeah, very current question that is on, the minds of every C-suite, agenda. And the recommendation that we have is, for sure, every importer should be keeping track of their liquidation status, entries that have been liquidated, because that is a dotted line to how long they have, over a 180-day period, to protest a previously finalized entry. So you need to know what possible entries are within a protest period today versus if it was an April clearance from the April 2nd announcement. That average period would now start to materialize in February. However, customs could be liquidating entries sooner, right? So liquidation reports, being a ACE participant, going into your ES 003 or ES 005 or 010 reporting is very, very important. And then, there are many questions about, is protest enough? Should I do like Costco? Should I go out and, file my own action with the Court of International Trade, right? So that I am avoiding a possible bottleneck in the refund process, however that refund process will be defined. So those are options, right? However, we are in January 2026. There is a projection that there's going to be a decision made within the next 45 to 60 days. So as those liquidations mature, I say stay abreast, stay current of the developments, and again, keep sipping the tea.
Right. And talking about refunds, right? So Customs has now officially mandated that if you are going to be receiving refunds, you need to be they're only going to be sending those electronically, which basically means if you don't have your ACH set up, no refunds for you. So how do importers make sure that they have this checked off? And if they don't, is Customs going to be sending them a reminder?
There will be no reminders. So, Customs has already advised the trade that this is the mechanism and the platform for refunds. So, if you are not part of that ACH electronic registration platform, then the immediate task is to register, right, for electronic refunds. There is not going to be any government unfoundmoney.com that you could just sit out there and say, okay, here it is as a courtesy notice from Customs. So Customs is a revenue collection agency, not a revenue refund agency. So they feel if you aren't astute enough to keep track of monies owed, especially in this particular process, then those funds will remain again in a dormant state.
Thank you. Yeah, make sure everyone out there, you do your due diligence and register. If an importer cannot see this themselves, they're relying blindly on the broker, which is risky in this high refund environment. A couple other interesting headlines, right? So China has actually effective January 1, they've reduced tariffs on more than 900 different products and lower than the most favored nation tariff. So the interesting strategy here is while we go high, right, we keep increasing tariffs, they are actually going lower. And obviously, they're looking at our trading partners to say, hey, if the US is going to be at this high tariff, you can come to us and, we'll happily make a deal, right? Adversely, on the other end, we have Mexico, who's now actually strategically aligned with the US. They decided to put tariff hikes on China up to 35%. And obviously, they're still continuing in talks with us to make sure that they can keep the trade flowing between our two nations. So some interesting updates there. All right, now we move on to what we call the insider brew. And this is really just what we're seeing from being in the trenches, right? And we spoke about this last time. I don't think this is going away at all this year. Enforcement is a real thing with Customs. They are an enforcement agency. And here is the proof, right? Where what we have seen, especially in the past 30 to 60 days, uh, Customs has decided to bypass the Customs Form 28, which is the request for information, and they're going kind of straight to a CF-29, right, which is a notice of action. And it's this kind of a strike first, ask questions later. So, Rennie, why is CBP taking this approach? Have you seen this before, or what do you suggest for importers to do if they have not yet been approached?
Sure. So this is a prime example of common practice versus compliant practice. And the CF-28 and CF-29 process is not new to the trade community. It's just as a common practice, many importers were used to receiving a request for information first and having a 30-day or possibly extended, time frame beyond 30 days to respond to customs inquiries on that CF-28 prior to an action being taken by customs. Well, you alluded to in the opening that we are in a very different state of operations when it comes to customs and border protection. The influence of national security and trade enforcement, this is a direct representation and demonstration of that. This is trade enforcement. Customs says, I don't need to ask any questions on a CF-28. The maturity of the ACE platform, the data that an importer has already provided at the time of entry, has given customs enough information to make a decision that there is an enforcement action that is pending. Now, it doesn't mean a CF-29 doesn't have the opportunity to present a question, because on the CF-29 process, there is the option of an action being proposed versus an action taken. And again, as a common practice, we are used to CF-29s only being action taken. Well, Customs says, I'm being, influenced by this new mandate of trade enforcement. So let's cut out the questions. Let's go right to a proposed action. I'll still give you 20 days to respond before the action is taken. However, what we've seen in the last month is that Customs has a zero tolerance to an extension. You've already submitted your entry through your broker or as a direct filer. Customs says, the time for you to get it right and have that affirmation of where this information came from was prior to entry. We're only asking you to support where this information came from. So you shouldn't need an extension in Customs' eyes, because they want to get to the chase. They want to get to the issuance of that penalty, and they want to boast those numbers. And you mentioned that $90 billion amount. Again, Customs is staging themselves on revenue collection. And this is a huge, huge effort that we see moving forward, that I only think will increase for all importers. So be ready, number one, ACE participant, to be conscious of CF-29s being issued to you, communications with your brokers to make sure if you haven't received it, the broker communicates that to you, which is, again, this is not something that's going to be every now and then. This is a major, major effort of trade enforcement that is going to inundate the trade community. So brokers are going to have to be, again, aligned to make sure that that information is transferred over to importers in the absence of direct ACE activity and notations.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that basically, right, as we've been saying all along, Customs has been given the kind of the directive of like tariffs equal revenue. We want to collect all of the revenue possible, get after it. And what's interesting with the notice of actions that they're going right to is that they're basically, as you said, they're saying, well, you presented these entries 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, right? And at that time, and the ones that we're really seeing being hit, right, are the Section 232, the steel derivatives, right? The non-steel, kind of they're kind of asking, so you made the entry months ago, you declared saying that X value is non-steel and to be, subject to another tariff rate, not 50%. So how did you come up with that number? Right. That's kind of what they're saying.
Right.
And as you said, they're like, I'm not going to give you more time to figure it out. You should have figured it out before.
Absolutely.
And so what if an importer has not received these yet, and being that we're seeing an influx of these, what should they be doing today in preparation that or anticipation that this might be coming down the pike for them?
Well, the overall objective is for every importer to realize that a trade compliance defense demonstration program effort is a requirement of being an importer now. This is not a luxury. This is not a best practice. And your efforts to be able to demonstrate responding to inquiries from customs on entries previously filed is, again, the lack of that demonstration would represent an immediate penalty. So we recommend that you start building up that compliance profile, that you start looking at job descriptions of your internal team and say, okay, maybe purchasing is not your only function. Maybe finance is not. We need to focus on trade compliance and embrace it, irregardless of the size of your company. Trade compliance demonstration isn't just for Fortune 1000 companies. It is for every importer named on a CF 7501 entry summary who has taken on the responsibility to declare that all the information is true and correct to the best of my knowledge, and being able to support that upon inquiry is, again, what we are talking about and is the expectation of customs. So the elevation of trade compliance is an immediate need right now, far more than ever in our past.
Great. Moving on to our strategy spotlight for today. So BKIP, right, known as the Broker Known Importer Program, oftentimes, I should start by saying there is 2,000 permitted corporate customs brokers, right? And there's about 350,000 active importers. And so there is a huge gap in terms of number of importers, customs brokers, and then you have customs agents. I don't have that number, but that I'm sure is pretty slim. So there are ways, though, right, to kind of partner with customs, and we often talk about, right, and a lot of what we've been saying today, even with the CF29s, is typically importers have always just played defense, right? They wait for customs to come to them, knocking on their door, asking them questions, and then what do? Then they scramble. Then they're like, oh, how do I got to answer this? Where do I get this information from? Some are actually compliant, but they just don't have it well documented, right? So BKIP, if you don't mind, Randy, give us a little bit of background. What's the history of this program, and really why is it so rare that importers are really rarely aware of the benefits of this program?
Sure. So BKIP is the acronym that represents the Broker Known Importer Program. And the legacy of the derivation of how it became to be is customs realized that there were many importers who were not necessarily ready to apply for the Importer Self-Assessment Program, which is now called the Trusted Trader Program, which would basically be a voluntary effort to go out to customs and invite customs to look at your entire profile and invite customs to look at your written procedures and processes, and then reward you with benefits of being an importer that represented compliance awareness. Customs realized that there were few importers in the scope of all activity that was ready for that effort. Which is, again, represented by there are 12,000 companies in the CTPAT program, which is a first requirement to be in the Trusted Trader Trade Compliance Program. There are only 350 companies out of that 12,000 that have taken that invitation directly from customs. So where did the rest of those importers go? Whether they were in CTPAT or not, customs said, importers could rely on that very good relationship and trust they have with their broker and reach out to their broker and demonstrate to their broker, who should know whether or not their clients have an import compliance platform, who should know whether or not there are internal written procedures in place at that importer's establishment, their classification, valuation, origin skill sets. And if that importer can demonstrate to their own trusted broker that they have these things in place, then the broker could go on record and acknowledge those compliance practices and certify the importer as being a known importer with trade compliance demonstrations. Now, the reason why this isn't as popular as it should be, one, there are a lot of brokers who don't have the internal trade compliance capabilities to rate, to score, or because of the importance and common practice of the customer relationship. There are many brokers who don't want to go and say to their customer, you know what, you do not have trade compliance processes in place. They'd rather say,
We don't want to be the
hey,
bearer of bad news.
we don't want to be the bearer of bad news, so let's stay out of that conversation, right? Let's just clear your shipments and hope customs don't ask about trade compliance. Well, those days are gone, because every question, every CF-28, every CF-29, every letter of investigation is a trade compliance question. So BKIP is an opportunity to build on the relationships with your broker, to have your broker again confirm that you have trade compliance capabilities in-house, and if not, work with you to build them up. This is not a yes/no answer. If there are things that you need, then you need to escalate those areas, again, where your broker would feel comfortable, again, certifying you that they know as a broker, as a licensed industry expert, that you as an importer have these things in place. And what's the carrot for you as an importer? You get the benefit of expedited clearances. You get the benefit of mitigation to fines and penalties. There is a tremendous carrot out there as customs increases, again, their efforts of trade enforcement. So BKIP is not just an acronym that has been here and we can forget about. It is a very important aspect of that trade compliance escalation and elevation of your demonstration as an importer. Again, for those C-suite conversations who are looking at, how do I save money? How do I avoid financial risk to the organizations? You put again, insurance policy and practice in place that can guarantee you mitigated circumstances.
Yeah, and I guess you're like in today's tariff environment, you know, tariffs aren't a line item on the P&L that just disappears. In fact,
Nope.
It's been elevated to probably one of the top three, costs and expenses for importers. And so to not have strategies on how to, mitigate and protect and defend that is probably not a good idea in 2026. So would you recommend in this environment, if you're an importer and you have a few options in terms of like, how do you create this offensive playbook? Would BKIP kind of be, a great place to start? How do you decide between BKIP and CTPAT? There are options out there. They're very different. I know we don't have time to go into CTPAT, but like, is this a good kind of launch pad to start a kind of building up a compliance playbook?
Yeah. So trade security under CTPAT and trade compliance under BKIP and also under the Trusted Trader Compliance are related, but two different efforts, right? So if you are not in the CTPAT program, and even if you are in the CTPAT program, but not in the Trusted Trader Compliance, then definitely you should pursue the BKIP option. Trade compliance is essential. Of course, I also recommend that, for trade security, be a part of the CTPAT, but it's not either or. It is
Right.
both. And it is something that you can do concurrently because CTPAT is an application with customs. BKIP is a demonstration to your broker, right? Or to a member of the brokerage community with internal trade compliance expertise that could facilitate the BKIP certification. So I think these are concurrently, but if I had to put them in order, BKIP first, CTPAT second, right? And then the elevation and the demonstration of those controls leading towards a compliance manual. Don't go out and buy a compliance manual off the shelf and put your name on it. Customs considers that fraud. Okay, what you do is you build a process, steps towards compliance demonstration that you can defend. Off the shelf images of compliance manuals is indefensible and again considered as trade fraud.
Right. Yeah. Last note on this. It's just important to note that that once a licensed customs broker kind of certifies an importer as under BKIP, it's not transferable, right? So that is unique to that broker. So in other words, CargoTrans BKIP validations for an importer can't be used by another broker. And this might be, I would say, actually, the argument, this is another reason of why importers of record may want to consider centralizing their customs brokerage. So
Absolutely.
we have about 3 minutes left. As you all can see, tariffs and trade didn't take a break for the holidays. And as we discussed, customs is stepping up its aggressiveness with enforcement and importers that add offense, right, to their playbook will be in a much better position than those that play defense only. So do we have any Q&A? Val, I don't know if you are on the mic, but if you saw any questions come in, we have 2 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. It's been so much relevant and resonating information shared by both of you today. So we do have one question that I see here. Why does centralizing your customs broker relationship matter more now than ever?
So it's a great question. And I think that answer differs depending on if you're an importer looking to work with a transactional customs broker or a customs broker that does both transactional and trade advisory. Oftentimes we'll say this is kind of the relationship has elevated similar to your trusted CPA, right? Your accountant or your financial planner. A licensed custom broker really benefits from seeing the entire supply chain, and then they can continue to add value once they have visibility, right, to that complete supply chain. Also, again, in today's environment, there's significant benefits from filing PSCs, protests, drawbacks. If all that data is centralized in one broker's ERP, I would say that there is an ease of doing business in that way. So looks like we're at time. If there are other questions, we will get back to you. Thank you all for joining. Our goal with the Tariff Tea is simple. It's really just to make sure that importers don't get burned. And what we are looking out for next month is obviously the Supreme Court ruling. We're going to continue to look at the India-US talks to see where that goes. We'll continue to share how to play offense, and maybe we'll have some more information on how Venezuela now gets kind of thrown into this tariff mix. Thank you all. Have a great day. See you next time.